This is the Roots and All podcast, and I'm your host, Sarah Wilson. Join me as I talk about all aspects of gardening with some of the top horticulturists from around the world. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Roots and All, which is a very different episode because I am crazily trying to prep for the Chelsea Flower Show and I'm off there tomorrow. And I'm speaking to Jake Rayson, who is a previous guest, and I will let him just say a little bit about himself before I go too much further. But basically, we're going to do an AMA, which is an Ask Me Anything episode, but I'm very pressed for time. I don't want to take up too much of Jake's time. We've had a little bit of an issue with the technical side of things. So I think we will just try and keep this relatively short and sweet. And I am going to speak a little bit about an idea that I've had, which I could do with some input on. It's very poorly formed at this stage. It's very much an embryo of an idea. I'm hoping Jake's going to help me tease it out a little bit, and then that's going to be the episode this week. And it is an episode that I'm going to do for the Chelsea Fringe, which, as anybody who's listened to my Tim Richardson episode will know, Chelsea Fringe kind of runs in tandem with the Chelsea Flower Show, and the idea is that we take a slightly different view to the classic flower show idea, and we kind of explore different ways of approaching horticulture, different ways of gardening, stuff that's a little bit avant-garde. So this episode is my chance to introduce an idea that I've had that is a little bit maybe challenging the norms when it comes to horticulture and growing food. So that's it from me. I'm going to hand you over now to Jake, who's going to tell you a little bit about himself. And I'm hoping he's got a few questions that he's going to speak to me about, and we will go from there. Okay, thank you, Jake.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, well, I am a wildlife food forest garden designer. That's the title that I've given myself because I design forest gardens. And if you've listened to that previous episode, you'll know what they are. But essentially, it's a perennial garden which has been created to emulate the edge of woodland, and it's a productive garden as well. So I'm very much into the crossover between ornamental, edible, and wildlife gardens. So yes, and thank you very much for inviting me on, Sarah. It's very kind of you. Nice to be in the limelight.
Thank you very much, Jake. You have always been an excellent supporter of the show and me, so I appreciate everything you do.
Would you like me to start with the listener question?
Yeah, go for it. Let's do that one first, because that was interesting, and I thought I might quite like to answer that one, although I'm not going to be controversial, I hope.
So there was a listener question from Alison. Was there a guest that really changed your view on a topic, or someone you had on that you really disagreed with?
Benjamin Vogt was very much a guest who I think changed my view on a topic. But I think that because I do a lot of research for episodes, it's not necessarily that somebody comes on and surprises me and completely wows me with their views, because I tend to have researched them. So I suppose I know what their views are before they come on to the podcast. You know, it's not that I speak to somebody during an interview, I get a real light bulb moment, because as I say, I kind of have checked their work out. But yeah, so certainly the work of Benjamin Vogt and Doug Tallamy, I found really interesting before I spoke to them. I think maybe Simon Leadbeater was a bit of a revelation, because he doesn't have a book that I'd kind of read before the interview. So he was coming to me with a lot of knowledge that he had that I wasn't necessarily party to prior to the interview. So yeah, I suppose he was really quite informative, and he did really interest me with what he had to say. There hasn't really been anyone that I disagreed with. This is a really awful thing to say, and I shouldn't say it as a kind of somebody who does media production, but if I had somebody who I really, really didn't agree with, I don't know if I would be brave enough to have them on the podcast and challenge them. I think I might find that quite tricky, to invite somebody on and then to attack their point of view or to interrogate them too much. But so the people that I speak to, I guess there are just elements of what they say that I might challenge. So Darryl Moore, for example, his book, he was on a previous episode. There's elements of his book that I don't necessarily agree with, but his kind of overall ethos I would certainly be on board with. And I think maybe when I read that question, the two that really sprung to mind, there were two, and the first one was Kim Wilkie, who I spoke to, who is an amazing landscape designer, you know, really incredibly talented person. And I spoke to him about landforms and about changing the contours of the earth in a garden. And I asked him if he felt that in this kind of day and age, whether that was still a responsible thing to do. And he kind of gave the case for doing that style of gardening. And I'm not sure that I was 100% convinced on it. And I think the other person was Jeff Ollerton, who, again, his book, Pollinators, is fantastic. But he subscribes to the view that prior to us cultivating the land in the UK, it wasn't forest. It wasn't completely forested. And I think there's two sides to that debate. And I would probably come down on the side of the debate that I feel that if you did go back in time, a lot of the UK would be forested. And I don't base that on a huge amount of scientific knowledge, but I just base it on my observations of what happens to the land when you let it go in this country, and based on the kind of species that we would have had roaming the land. So that is two really minor things. And if everybody that I've spoken to, they're the only two things that I can think of where I have actually mentioned it to the guest maybe, or gone, oh, can we talk about that a bit more? But yeah, that really is it. I wouldn't say I agree with everybody what they're saying, but I certainly get their point of view, and I'm happy to listen to it and hear it.
With Jeff Ollerton's book, is it not more of a question of looking at what we can do now for pollinators rather than looking back to the past?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That is the focus of his book. And it's just that I think we went off on a tangent. And as I say, it was such a minor thing, but it's one of those things I suppose I felt strongly about to actually flag up and say, oh, hang on, there's 2 points of view there. Because he sort of spoke as if there was only that one take on historical landscapes. And I kind of just said, I think there's another school of thought, and highlighted that. But yeah, no, his book is absolutely about going forwards and how, the state of play at the moment and how we can improve it.
That's what I do like about your show as well, is the number of diverse perspectives that you don't get in an awful lot of mainstream media. You're hearing from a whole load of different voices and a whole load of different experiences as well. So every single time, even though I'm not that keen on the title of the podcast episode, I will always listen to it and I will always learn something. It's great. That's why I like it so much.
Oh, thank you.
And what was it about Benjamin Vogg's interview that changed your mind in his work?
He's just really, for want of a better phrase, ball to the wall. He's just like, no, I want to do it this way. I think this is the right way to do it. I 100% believe this is the correct way to do things. And he advocates for native planting. And he just argues the case really, really well for that particular style. So the prairie style of gardening in the US. And his book's just really unapologetically, no, I feel this is what we should be doing. This is why I feel it. It's really well argued. And he, at the moment, seems to be going really stratospheric. But when he first started, I think he rubbed people up the wrong way to a degree, because he was so uncompromisingly stuck to his beliefs, and fair play to him. He's done so well, and I really like his work, and I always have done.
I must admit, he's really influenced my thinking as well, because when I started out forest gardening, it was very much a question of what are the crops, what are the plants that can give me a produce. But thinking about a forest garden as an edible ecosystem has really shifted my emphasis to using native plants where possible. And I've got Benjamin to thank for that change in attitude. But I do feel a bit like, as a forest gardener, I am having my gardening cake and eating it, because it's like, oh, I can have any plant I like so long as it's edible or useful, and any native plant as well. One of the other guests on your podcast I thought was really interesting was Mary Reynolds with the rewilding. And it's not often that you hear in a podcast someone talking about wildlife and about other forms of life in such a connected way. And actually, I must admit that I had a tear in my eye when I was listening to that podcast. It was quite a revelation as well. And it seems to set up the whole rewilding discussion that's going on at the moment, even though a lot of people like to polarize it. Has that had an effect at all on your thinking about gardening and the role of wildlife and natural processes in gardening?
Yeah, Mary Reynolds was such an interesting one. I didn't know much about her before I saw her book, and then I watched a film that they made about her and her Chelsea garden that she did back in the day, and it was really funny. So I got to the end of the interview, absolutely loved her, loved the book. She was so awesome. And then right at the end, and I never do this, and I just went to her, Mary, I've got to tell you this story. I'd woken up one morning, gone to the toilet, was sitting there on the loo, and looked down at my leg, and I had this mark on my leg, and it was like a semicircle, sort of almost like rays radiating out from this central point. And I looked down at my leg and I thought, how on earth have I got this mark on there? There's nothing like in my bed. It wasn't like a button or, thing that I'd slept on. I don't wear any jewelry of that shape. There was just nothing that could have made this mark on my leg. And I'm sitting there looking at it and I thought, this is so weird. Like, what is this? And by the time I got up and went to show my partner, it had gone. It had completely faded. So I didn't capture it or anything. And I told Mary Reynolds the story, and I thought, I don't know why I felt compelled to tell her this story. And she went, oh my God, did you read the bit at the front of my book? And I went, oh, yes. And then she'd had a similar kind of thing, a similar incident. And it must have been lodged in the back of my brain. I had just had to tell her, and she was like, oh, this is so weird, and we sort of spoke about that. So behind the scenes, there's little strange things that happen with the podcast and the interviewees and everything. But yeah, that's kind of what stuck with me about Mary. And yeah, I love her work. I do hope one day she might come back to Chelsea and give everyone a kick up the bum again. But yeah, in the meantime, she's doing great stuff. So yes, I did like her work, and I really liked the fact that, again, she was unapologetically spiritually connected to the landscape, and she wasn't afraid to say it. And so yeah, I suppose everybody that I speak to, every book that I read sinks in on some level and changes my perspective.
And on that topic as well, I remember a while back you were interviewing somebody who was quite right wing, like an owner of an estate or something. And I don't know what ever came of that, if that ever translated into a podcast. I can't remember who the guest was supposed to be.
Can't think who that was.
It was in the messages for Patreon in the chat, and it came up.
Oh God, yeah, no, it didn't
Right.
come out. So there's sometimes like publishers or PR guys get in touch and they'll say to me, do you want to interview this person? And I kind of have to say, well, you can certainly send me the book, but I may not accept. And there have been a few times actually where I've kind of looked at it and thought, I'm a bit on the fence. And like I said, I don't want to steer the conversation too much in one direction or the other, because I don't want to be like this gatekeeper who says, you can't hear this voice, you can't hear that voice. That there are some that I do find a bit unpalatable, or I get to the end of the book and I just think, do you know what, that book was shite. I think this was just cobbled together as a moneymaker, and I'm not interested in speaking to the person. And weirdly, quite often, if I just ignore the email, they don't come back and chase me, or something happens and the interview gets shelved, and it just seems to work out perfectly. So maybe I'm putting that out into the ether that I don't actually want that person on the podcast necessarily, and for some reason it falls through. So no, there hasn't been anybody who I've regretted or felt compromised for having on. But yeah, no, that one never came off. So that was another one of those weird ones where it didn't happen, and I was glad.
I do remember a time as well, it really stuck with me, was when you asked people to contribute to get the voices heard that people don't normally hear. It's like the small people who have something to say, but those ideas don't get aired. That was going back a year. So what's your kind of process for getting new ideas together for the podcast?
I definitely do a lot of reading. I get sent a lot of books now, which is lovely. But I do also go out and do a bit of exploring on my own and just see stuff that piques my curiosity. And something might pop up on Instagram, or I might be at an event and meet someone. It all seems very serendipitous, to be honest with you. I don't put a lot of effort in. I guess I just keep my ear to the ground. And sometimes people email me and say, you need to speak to this person. They're really awesome. Yeah, so I'm lucky. The well hasn't run dry yet.
And you don't have like an overarching master plan then?
For world domination?
For world domination and podcast episodes?
No, I've got no plan from one week to the next. I have no idea what I'm doing, in all honesty. That is the complete God's honest truth.
I do find it fascinating, though, with gardening, because I come from a web design background and also quite a political background as well. My reasons for getting into gardening weren't really about gardening so much as the climate emergency. And now, with all the alarm bells going off, like there's flooding in Italy at the moment and there's record temperatures in Southeast Asia, it is on almost like a daily basis. There are the extreme weather events across the globe. But how do you see gardening fitting into the nature and climate emergency? What's your take on it? What's your kind of feeling about it?
If you go back a couple of years in episodes, you will hear me saying, I don't care about growing food. It's not my thing. I don't get it. I don't like it. And now I've gone completely the other way. And I think that gardening is going to have to be focused around growing food and, yes, space for wildlife, space for people, space for relaxation to assist with mental health. I think we're going to need to kind of reclaim community spaces. And yeah, I really think that the onus is going to be on food. And whether we like it or not, we are going to have to stop gardening the way that we are at the moment. You know, even if you go to nurseries, like now, today, I've been to nurseries to look for plants. And I'm kind of going, well, why can't I get any ivy? And why can't I get any of this? And there's no perennials that look really like it. And I'm part of the problem because I'm looking for plants for impact for a trade stand. So like I say, I am part of the problem, but I also recognise that there does seem to be a supply issue, and that at some point we're going to have to start growing our own and doing slow gardening.
And what about wildlife as part of your gardening? Because when I first started listening to the podcast, it was very much as like, this is a wildlife gardening podcast. How much of that forms your outlook and forms your gardening practice now?
I think the wildlife kind of guides pretty much everything that I do in the garden on a personal level and professional. I do think that we are too dominant in a garden and in the landscape. I've said it before, I don't kill anything. Everything's got a place, and I try and keep everything really low impact, low input, and just see how things develop. And I know that's not for everybody at the moment, and especially if you're working for clients, but I think it will have to become the way for everybody. We'll just have to observe, we'll have to sit back and not be so invasive and just edit rather than going in and completely sweeping the board, raising a garden to the ground and then replanting. I don't think there's a place for that really going forwards.
But isn't that in kind of contravention with what an actual show garden is like? The show garden's the diametrical opposite of that, isn't it?
Yeah, they're so weird. I spoke about this a couple of episodes ago, I think, and it is such a strange thing. They do inspire people. And I mentioned on a previous episode that I'm going along to do the show. We're doing the trade stand for the London College of Garden Design, which they very kindly let the charity that I work for design and build. And I'll be taking along some of our veterans with us, and they love it. And one's coming with us tomorrow. He's still talking about his experience last year. And for him, it was just amazing to go there and to see the whole thing. It's a circus really, and to get involved with it and to be excited by it. And it's inspired him to keep coming to site. I'm not saying it's the sole reason, but it's one of the reasons why he's still engaged with horticulture. And then he went on to do a course at one of the colleges because he just really got into horticulture. So it's got its plus points. In its current format, it's not sustainable. That's a sort of short way of summing it up, but I think that's how I feel about it at the moment.
Never mind the climate emergency. I think you want to talk about salad.
I do want to talk about salads. You know what? I've realised I've got a bit of a thing about salad, because I thought last year about doing a book about leaves and basically doing a portrait of all the different leaves that you can eat throughout the year, because there's so many of them. I just didn't have time. I have got too many things going on. But then I thought about salad the other day, and I was reading this amazing book, and it's called A Year of No Garbage, and it's by Eve Shobe, and I'm hoping she might come on the podcast actually. But she spent a whole year trying to send nothing to landfill, just recycle everything. And she really struggled. And the book is quite terrifying in terms of how much plastic is produced and actually what can be done with that plastic, which is really very little in terms of making it reusable. So I thought about salad. And like I say, I've been mulling it over for a while. And I just think that actually bagged salad is a bit obscene. And so I thought I was going to dig into this. I'm going to look at all the bagged salads that we have in the UK. And so in 2020, the prepared salad market was worth 1.83 billion, which is
1.83 billion.
Yes, I'm going to have links. I'm going to put this all in a blog post or something, and I'll link to the article. But I just thought that cannot be real. I mean, and that does include things like potato salad and, little, I don't know, if you go to M&S and get their quinoa salad or something like that, that does include that, but that also does include bagged salad. And I just thought that's unbelievable. I'm gobsmacked by that.
And that's mostly in single-use plastic as well.
Yes, that is the problem.
Wow.
There's a few kind of like main brands of salad. So I looked into Floret, which is quite a common one, and they are the only one that I could find that's got any information on their website about their bags, and they do use virgin plastic. And it says that you can recycle their plastic bags, but you have to take it back to a major retailer. So you can't do it curbside. You've got to take it back to the shop. And they obviously are looking into ways of making this more sustainable. But they said that if they didn't use plastic, then the salads would struggle to last a day before they wilted. So I thought that was really interesting.
It's a really interesting question. So it's like 1.83 billion pounds is how much the market is worth. 1.83 billion. That is right, yeah?
Well, do you know what? I can't believe that, but I did think that was absolutely unbelievable. But I'm going to.
It's a vast amount. But how much of that, though, is the packaging, and how much of it must be worth an absolute fortune to the packaging suppliers as well?
I presume so. I'm just trying to find this. It was on a website called Global Data. I mean, yeah, it does state that on there. And that's leaf salads, potato salads, and other non-fruit salads, according to this.
What kind of plastic is used to wrap the prepared salads?
Soft plastic. So soft plastic is what you can take back to your local store for recycling. But I also looked at another website, which is WRAP, WRAP, and the CEO, Marcus Govers, said that as little as 6% of soft plastic is collected and recycled in the UK, despite making up nearly a quarter of all plastic packaging by weight. So, as I say, people are not really bagging up their salad and taking it back to the recycling points in the shops. And I think as well, if you want to do that, according to the book by Eve, you have to wash it. And then if there's any stickers on it, you have to make sure that they're off, because otherwise it makes it not feasible for recycling. So, you know, that in itself is a rigmarole. You've got to somehow get back to the shop. So presumably drive, you know, so there's all these issues with it. And also, I think there's another stat. So I looked on Tesco's website about their soft plastic recycling, and it said that 80% of the plastic returned is recycled and 20% goes into landfill. But if you look at the book that Eve wrote, she kind of goes into what recycling really means for this plastic, and it just never goes away. So I think there's a lot of wastage. I think a lot of it doesn't actually get recycled. A lot of it does go to landfill, even if it ends up at a recycling centre. And if it does get recycled, it can be something like, I don't know, park bench. So, you know, once it's stopped being a park bench, then what does it come? Once you've put this plastic out into the world, it is never going away. And like, she's got loads of stats at the beginning of her book, and one of them is 40% of the world's oceans are covered in plastic. I mean, it's just obscene. So there's got to be really, really easy ways of fighting this. So I looked into how many packs of leafy salad are sold every year. And this is in the convenience channel, according to Scottish Grower. And there's 65 million packs of leafy salad sold each year in the UK. And UK shoppers throw away 35% of the prepared salad they buy. And that's according to the grocer. So when you think about that, I mean, we can't do it. Why are we doing it? I can't believe it. It's madness.
It's convenience. It's all about convenience. People don't have the time. That's what it's about, isn't it?
I guess so, but we're going to have to make the time, because we can't keep on just kicking the can down the road.
Are there any other problems with bag salad? Is it just about the plastic, or is it anything to do with the how they're grown, or the input, how much energy they take? Is there anything, or the chemicals that are used?
The plastic really is the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? I get it. So, yeah, of course, it's all in, you know, a lot of it would be intensively farmed. It would be sprayed with pesticides and insecticides, and it might be grown in soil that's depleted of nutrients. So probably got bugger all in the way of nutrient value anyway. There's so many things, so many problems. There's shipping it around the place in refrigerated lorries. You know, got to do this kind of really, really quickly, because obviously it does a wilt. I think some of it they probably preserve with a gas in the bag. Everything about it is labour intensive and unnecessary, when you think that actually anybody, and I can't think of anyone who couldn't go and either grow a few leaves or forage a few leaves. If you just want some green leaves to put in your sandwich, you can literally, and you'll know this better than I do, you can literally go and pick them off a tree. So there's no excuse for buying these bagged salads. I just can't do it anymore. I'm not going to do it. And I would really like it if people kind of got behind this idea and joined in. And I will put together something that's a bit more well thought out at some point. But I did kick a few names around, and you helped me, didn't you, with a tagline?
Yes. Oh, the tagline. I forgot. What is it? You tell me what it is.
Right. Well, I think I'm going to call it tops salad. If anyone's got any better ideas, let me know.
But there's an issue with salad that needs addressing.
Exactly. Yeah. Which I love, and I am going to use that. I'm going to steal that. So I'm definitely going to use that.
Are you leading up for a book then? Is this like preparing the site for a new book?
No, I mean, I need another thing to do. But yes, if anyone's listening and they want to give me a big advance for writing my book about salad and why we need to combat prepared salad and which leaves we should use, I would be more than happy to do that.
Yeah, and from a forest gardening perspective, there is absolute load of different salads that you can be using. Just in like most wildflowers, don't quote me on which. There's so many different wildflowers that you can use in a salad, and there's edible tree leaves as well. So mulberry leaves, grapevine leaves, lime tree leaves, hawthorn leaves. The list is vast. And then there's a whole range of different leaves. Oh, sweet cicely leaves used in a salad, fennel, a whole range of different things that are perennial as well. I think part of the problem is, having worked in a market garden before, the amount of weeding that you have to do with salad, it's weeding and watering, that's on a scale, that's quite tricky. So to look at different salad alternatives would be really, really useful.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like another thing I think that piqued my curiosity was I bought myself the Forager's Calendar by John Wright. Just in January, the things that you can forage for are Alexander's bittercress, common sorrel, dandelion roots, garlic mustard, oak moss, sea beet, three-cornered leek, and winter lava. So yeah, even in January, that's what we can be finding if we just get out and look for it.
And not wanting to push forest gardens too much, but
you're after a chapter, aren't you? It's fine.
No. But actually, being able to, you can plant these. You can put these plants in your garden. They're native plants. We've got Alexander's growing just down the road. It's because we're quite close to the coast. It does seem to like coastal conditions. So Alexander's are all over the place. There's great big patches of them, and it wouldn't take that much to grow them in this garden as well, to kind of keep you open to what's growing locally, and then propagate it for your own garden.
Yeah, absolutely. I really think that we need to crack on and do this. My only concern is that I'm going to be like Alan Partridge. You know, if there's like a UK marketing board or anything, I don't know whether they're going to... Did you ever see that episode where he upset the farmers and they shut the cow on him from the bridge? I just see myself under deluged by a ton of salad bags from some angry...
Rotten salad as well. Yeah. Rotten salad from a great height. Teach you to meddle in the multi-billion-pound salad market.
I don't want to put anyone out of business. I don't want to upset anyone.
I do think you need to make it easy for people too, so that if you can have there's annual salad, there's bean sprouts, and then you've got kind of perennial shrubs and trees. There's all these different kind of levels of salad that you can have in your garden. Have stuff close to the back door, have stuff further away, and different times of year as well. It would be really handy if you wrote a book about it, Sarah.
Okay, right, thanks. I'm on it. Yeah, I'll add it to my to-do list. Well, anyway, that's the basis of my idea, and I am going to take it forward because I do think it's important. And I've said it now. I've put it out there, haven't I, on the podcast? So I've got time to do it, and might ask for your help because you're good like that. So I'm going to wrap it up now. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy person. Can I direct people to your work?
Oh, yes, natureworks.org.uk. You can hire me as a garden designer, etc., etc. But there's a whole load of resources there. There's a resources page as well. And I'm just finding the overlap between wildlife gardening and ornamental gardening and edible gardening is absolutely brilliant. So there's a whole load of stuff there that you can get your teeth stuck into.
Excellent. Well, that is it from me. And thank you for listening. And if you've got any ideas about the salad campaign or anything else, then drop me a line, podcast@rootsandall.co.uk. Speak to you soon. You can download or listen to the podcast direct from the website, rootsandall.co.uk. Please also check out my Patreon, where you can make a one-off donation or take out a monthly subscription to help support the podcast. Because if you enjoy the show, please help it continue. I also have a GoFundMe where you can make a one-off donation. Even a one-off donation of £1 helps, and I'll be really grateful for your support. So please go to Patreon or GoFundMe and search for Roots and All Podcast.